Well, good morning, and thanks for staying tuned to News Radio 1310. Or if you're just joining us, we do have a special debate. We have Representative Lance Clow in with us, as well as Paul Thompson, the challenger to District 24 seat. So we're going to explain just a little bit how it's going to work. We have some pre-agreed topics that the candidates will discuss. I've come up with a series of questions, relatively broad but specific to the topic. They will discuss it. Each candidate will get a 2-minute introduction. We will begin with Mr. Paul Thompson and then followed by Lance Clow with his opening statements. And then we will follow with the questions. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to answer the question. And then following the questions, we will follow up with a 3-minute rebuttal and closing statements at the end of the program. And then we'll kind of have an open mic for the candidates. They can ask each other questions. So we are going to jump right into it. I'm going to get my clock ready. I'm using my iPhone as the timer. So we will begin with Mr. Paul Thompson. Please go ahead and opening statements. Go.
Great. Hey, first of all, thank you, Benito, and thank you, Representative Clow, for the opportunity for the debate. And I extend my appreciation also to Bill Cawley and to my family who are listening now as well. But listen, I've spent my years as a values voter, and I've always enjoyed the research and processing the candidates before I vote. And I feel as though I've never wasted a vote ever. And I read party platforms and I look at parties to hold their candidates accountable. And so where I've usually voted Republican, I have voted upon occasion third party. Historically, usually a vote for Republicans, but as of late, with my current representation, I find the option in conflict with my values. So I am at peace with a bold platform of the Constitution Party, which I'm running on. And I invite the listener today to investigate my website and read the platform of the Constitution Party of Idaho. And you'll find that I more represent the values of your Republican values than does the current representation. And I expect a party to hold its candidates to the platform fidelity even after they're elected. And I want a voter to know that the person that they voted for will represent them at the State House with principled consistency. Hey, if you want a relationship with a small, limited government, then listen closely to what I say today. But if you want a big, overreaching, unlimited government, then keep voting for the current representation. If you value life from fertilization to natural death without exceptions, then elect me on November 3rd. But listen, if you're not bothered by the ongoing slaughtering of babies, not only in this city, but throughout the state, then keep voting for the current representation.
Okay, thank you very much. And of course, if I can figure out how to turn it off. There we go. Okay, now we will move on now to Mr. Representative Lance Clow. Begin.
Yeah, thank you, Benito, and good morning, everyone. Steve, Mr. Thompson, all the listeners out there, and I too want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here today. Thank my wife for her support of my candidacy and all my friends that have helped me over the years. I know we will get to know each other better over this next 50 minutes or so. I want people to know a little bit about who I am. I've served the citizens of Twin Falls in many volunteer roles for over 43 years. My wife and I have 2 daughters and 5 grandkids. We have been blessed with good health and applied ourselves to our successful professional careers. Dee Dee is a retired first and second grade teacher, and I have spent 40 years in the financial services industry as a lending officer, marketing manager, consumer compliance officer, and as a certified financial advisor. Why is that important? Because it's this volunteer work and my professional experience that led me to Twin Falls City Council and eventually as mayor. In 2012, I realized that these experiences had provided me the foundation to better serve in the legislature. I am now a well-respected Republican member of the Idaho House of Representatives, where I currently serve as chairman of the Education Committee. There is still work to be done, much of which we will touch on over the next 50 minutes. As chairman of the Education Committee, I see several pending issues. How will we deal with school closings, and who should make that decision? We also have legislation pending out there that will respond to a Supreme Court decision this last spring called Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue. This alone will lead to many discussions about school choice and, believe it or not, religious freedom. Like most Idahoans, I enjoy the outdoors, skiing, fishing, golf, and tennis, and I do not hurt anyone. but I respect those that do. I do not hunt anymore. I think I said hurt anyone. People often ask how I stand in all these meetings that I attend, and I tell people some people go hunting and fishing, and I prefer meetings.
Okay. Opening statements are concluded, and all right, let me reset my phone and the timer for our questions. We agreed that Paul would start with the first question, so I will ask and then start your timer. So, first question: what is your position on abortion? Begin.
Yeah, thank you, Benito. I think this is an extraordinarily critical issue. 200 babies murdered in the city of Twin Falls in 2018. That's in the city of Twin Falls alone. That's roughly 20 babies a month are murdered in the city of Twin Falls. If there's a reason for the governor to declare a state of emergency, I would argue this would be it. That babies are being murdered not only in this city, but they're being murdered in the state of Idaho. Last year on March 18th, 2020, the House passed a Senate bill 1385, and it was a bill that would abolish abortion in Idaho when and if the Supreme Court reverses the Roe v. Wade issue. My argument inside of this is that for 47 years now, the United States has been allowing the murdering of babies to take place, and the only law that we have on the books that regulates or allows murder is what we, the state of Idaho, have put into place. There are no federal laws that mandate or regulate abortion. And so the state of Idaho, under the current representation of Republicans at large, have been regulating when, how, and where babies can be murdered. And I'm here to say, on my watch, if the people would elect me, I will never let a moment go by to speak up and defend the life of the child in the womb, without exception. This is an absurd issue that has not been dealt with for 47 years. And if we're to think today that the Supreme Court is going to reverse this situation, and we will put them in position to be the legislators rather than we the people.
Okay. Reset the timer. Okay. Mr. Clow, begin.
All right. Thank you. This is obviously an important issue for the state, and I know my challenger here has really strong emotional feelings, and I respect all of those feelings and in agreement with most of it. The Idaho State Republican platform has a strong pro-life position. My record in the legislature has gained the endorsement of the Idaho Chooses Life based upon my 100% pro-life voting record on every pro-life bill. Abortion became a legal and popular choice of ending unwanted pregnancies and sex selection when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 1973 on the Roe v. Wade. I support to the Idaho's code prior to that decision. Over the past 47 years, it is estimated that over 60 million unborn children have been killed across the country through abortion. I understand the 200 here locally, and that contributes all to this. Conservative states have been working to reduce that number, but they have had minimal impact. I know some would say we should ignore the U.S. Supreme Court, and I think that's what we just heard. Regardless of what we individually believe, if we are to respect the Constitution, it is the ruling of the U.S. Supreme Court and our own Idaho Constitution, which proclaims the U.S. Constitution as the supreme law of the land. State laws that would defy the U.S. Supreme Court would not save one innocent unborn child. They would simply be declared unconstitutional. Idaho has passed many laws over the years, and in my time in the legislature, I have a 100% pro-life voting record. I joined with my Republican counterparts in support of pro-life positions in Trump's nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, and I think that's the best possibility of getting some overturned. I am pro-life, I support the Constitution, and I support the Supreme Court constitutional solution. And with that, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. You got a little time left. Let me reset my timer. Next question is on taxes. So, what is your position on state income tax and state taxes in general? Mr. Thompson, begin.
Yeah, listen, this is a matter that should have been settled long before now. Taxes have always been, and they'll likely continue to be, pieces of great discussion for us. There has obviously been a misunderstanding by current legislature to think that it's somehow appropriate to continue to tax the people from their income. So we have federal issues and we have state issues. Particularly, there's absolutely no reason to have a state income tax, especially as we've just learned from our own governor that we have excess money sitting inside of what's called a rainy day fund. And that fund continues to just mushroom in its size. And so, listen, if we move over to property taxes and make a conversation about that as well, here's another one of those great unfair taxes upon the people. Property taxes, it makes sense in a simple tax platform that you tax a sales transaction. And so property, when property is purchased, there would be a sales tax attached to that, and that makes sense, and it would be an appropriate place for that to be. But just like the lamb chop song, that children's song of lamb chop, the song that never ends, we sing the same song with property taxes. This is the tax that never ends. It goes on and on, my friends, as the song would further go. Some people started paying it not knowing that it would never end, and they'll continue paying it forever just because this is the tax that never ends. When will the people who have the right to own property have to stop paying rent to the federal government or to the county or to the state for their property? This is one of those things that I want to speak about on the House floor. Thank you.
Okay. Reset the timer. Mr. Clow, begin.
Yeah. Well, let us begin with property taxes because they are totally out of control, which means they are too high and they're unfair. As a member of the House Republican majority, we will be addressing this, and I expect recommendations this fall, potentially this week. Far and away, it is property taxes that we hear most about. Property taxes are the most transparent and direct tax to a property owner. Property taxes have some limits, but they continue to creep up with the power of compounding. Special tax levies and bonds are on top of the natural 3% creep we see each year. If your property is increasing in value faster than other properties, your taxes are also increasing more rapidly. The state revenues, on the other hand, have been growing at 5 to 7% per year, and they are based primarily upon, as referenced, income taxes and sales taxes. Meanwhile, local governments are not sharing in any of that revenue growth and are relying on property taxes. This is a tax on the value of property, not on an individual's ability to pay it. State taxes, on the other hand, are more based upon one's ability to pay. As referenced in sales taxes, if you're spending money to buy things, then you have the money and the taxes would be appropriately applied. In income taxes, at least you're showing the income that it would come out of. We need to reform our state and local tax system to reduce property taxes and their growth. This can be done. Few understand that state and local taxes in the way that I do. I have worked with both and have supported every tax relief bill, even the repeal of the grocery tax. I am one of the go-to legislators on this topic. We need to reduce local government reliance on property taxes. These taxes on property taxes are basically mandates. Were mandated for the county and the cities to provide public safety, jails, judicial systems, education, local roads, and these are driving taxes to an unsustainable level. I have the
Okay.
knowledge and experience to see the
All right.
tax relief.
Thank you. All right. We'll move on a little bit closer, hone it in local level. So, Mr. Thompson, are local option sales taxes needed for Idaho cities? Begin.
Yeah, listen, I think this is a valid consideration when it comes to taxes, especially in the sense of when we look at the historic position of where our founders viewed taxes, that they essentially believed that the best place to tax the people is not on their income, and that's thievery, but it really is to tax them on their excise, their fees, their expenses, their sales. And so a local option tax gives a local people the opportunity to by the influence of the people and from hearing the people that they would have the opportunity to set their own tax rates that would benefit the local rather than money being redistributed in many cases in an unequal manner across the state. And so many communities that have a lot of visitors from outside of its community misses the opportunity to use those who are using our roads, those who are using our services that the city provides. We're missing the opportunity for them to help us maintain those. And right now we're at the mercy of the redistribution of the property taxes mostly, and then some of that inside of the income taxes. This is a place where I think it'd be more fair and more appropriate that local communities would be given the opportunity to consider an excise tax that would be inside of the sales portion of where taxes would sit. So I would be in favor of a conversation on this, especially when we have to discuss about taxes. And if we're going to reduce taxes from the income side of the individual, we have to acknowledge there has to be an increase of a tax somewhere else to make up the difference. But more than anything, we've got to address the way we spend money in order to address the reduction of taxes at large. But in short order, I would be in favor of a conversation on local taxes.
Okay. All right. Reset the clock. Mr. Clow.
Yeah, thank you, Benito. Uh, Local option sales taxes is a very interesting topic. I came out of local government. Local government, I mean, cities and counties have been proponents of local option sales taxes for as long as I can recall. And I agree that the spending at the local level is one of the best sources for income versus property taxes. I have proposed on many occasions to our revenue and tax committees that they should be looking at local option taxes with the provision that it does reduce property taxes specifically. But more importantly, and I think it was alluded to by my opponent here, we need to be able to at least give that option to the local people to make that choice. That has been fought by many very powerful groups in the state. And every time that subject comes up, like with the Freedom Foundation, they would fight that to the bitter end to allow that to proceed. Um, the local option tax has a lot of merits. The challenges have come up is who does it? Do you have a county local option tax and then a city local option tax and then a highway district local option tax? How do you do that? And I recommended years ago when I was on the Association of Iowa Cities, I was their president, and prior to that I was in charge of a research group, a committee, and I recommended that we should have it more of a regional basis because people in Jerome don't like the idea of coming to Twin Falls and paying a sales tax, an extra sales tax that was imposed by the city or the county. However, if we were to somehow set up a sharing system amongst the sales taxes that are voted on by the different entities or populations, I think there's a way that we could pull that off and make sure that we do reduce property taxes with a local option sales tax. But we have to get the bickering between the counties and the cities out of the way.
Okay. All right. Time. All right. Reset the clock. Next question. Mr. Thompson, how do you view the Second Amendment? Begin.
Yeah, the Second Amendment, among those great rights that were given through the Bill of Rights that we have. And the Second Amendment is one of those that I think Idahoans treasure greatly. It's one that I don't think I have to say a whole lot about because it's well known that I would be a defender of the Second Amendment, that I would not support any kind of legislation that would introduce or support any advancement of restrictions of guns for the people. This is explicitly given to the people in the Second Amendment. And where I don't have an endorsement or a rating with the NRA, and that's primarily because I've never been in office before. And so I don't have the backing or the rating of the NRA. I'm not so sure I would even seek it. I'm not even a member of the NRA, but one thing I did do is I did answer surveys from the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance that was sent to every candidate in the state of Idaho. And it's my understanding that current representation did not fill out the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance survey. And for that matter, the records show that he's never filled out the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance surveys. And so from that vantage point, where I don't have an NRA rating, I certainly have an understanding of the Second Amendment and where Idahoans sit inside of this. So District 24, the opportunities that are before us is not something we can pass on to another. We don't have time to wait around on these kind of matters. We need to secure all rights in regards to the Second Amendment. And it's my word that I give to you that I will defend the Second Amendment to the end.
Okay, you got 10 seconds left. You'd like to
Yeah,
fill it?
I think I would say the same thing again, only faster in 10 seconds.
Okay. All right, time.
Thank
All
you.
right, Mr. Clow,
All
begin.
right. Thank you. You know, as often said, the Second Amendment secures all the other rights, and I agree with that. Idaho is ranked the #2 state in the country as a gun-friendly state. I'm proud to have helped write and co-sponsor Senate Bill 1313, which guarantees an individual's right to stand their ground. This bill helped move Idaho from third to second on that gun-friendly ranking. We often hear quotes about the Second Amendment. Section 11 of the Idaho Constitution does not provide good sound bites, but it is worth reading. I have already pledged to you my oath in office to follow the Constitution. So that would include the following quote: no law shall impose licensure, registration, or special taxation on the ownership or possession of firearms or ammunition. Nor shall any law permit the confiscation of firearms except those actually used in the commission of a felony. That is my red flag pledge to you and the state of Idaho. I will repeat that last part. This is important. No, nor shall any law permit the confiscation of firearms except those actually used in the commission of a felony. The red flag laws issue that was brought up by the Second Amendment Alliance is, and their concerns, these laws are simply unconstitutional under Idaho's Constitution and law. And I pledge my oath to the Constitution. My red flag pledge to you is I will uphold that Constitution. I am proud of the NRA that has given me an A rating and their endorsement. The Idaho Republican platform strongly supports gun rights. As your Republican candidate, like the NRA, you can trust your gun rights to me. Our citizens want to enjoy the great outdoors safely and securely. Hunting is a part of Idaho and is self-reliance, and so is self-reliance and personal protection. You can always count on me to protect the rights of every citizen and stand up to defend our U.S. and Idaho constitutions.
Time.
That includes
Time. And there's the bells. Okay. Reset the clock. That's the next question. All right. We'll move on to the K through 12 education. First off, I'll kind of load the question just a little bit, but what is your opinion on the budget spent on K through 12 education and your position on Common Core? Mr. Thompson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is a really critical question. You know, the lion's share of the state of Idaho's budget is dedicated to education, so it's giant. I don't argue that it should not have a significant or primary interest to us, because the Idaho Constitution does direct us to provide a common public school for all children, and so it is our responsibility. It's not the federal government's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the state of Idaho. And let's be clear on this. The house is on fire here. Not the neighbor's house. Our house is on fire when it comes to the House of Education, to the schoolhouse. That we have so many issues going on inside of our education. And the current representation sits as the chairman of the Education Committee. And where I appreciate the attention that he gives to many of the matters that cross their plate, it is also of interest that this is not a time to just simply manage the system. The house is on fire. We need buckets and buckets of water to put the house out. It was the House committee voted last year to repeal Common Core, which actually was against the direction of the chairman of the Education Committee. The Democrats and the chairman of that committee voted to keep Common Core in place in committee. The House did vote to abolish our relationship with Common Core, but I think it's important for us to understand that while the House is on fire and burning, that our current representation is part of the management of keeping Common Core in place in the state of Idaho. I have a lot more I could say on that, but I'm sure I can't get it in 5 seconds. Maybe I'll get it in my final closing moments.
Okay, time.
Thank you.
Mr. Clow, begin.
all right. Thank you very much. The budgets is the first item you mentioned, and I want to point out that Article 9 of the Idaho Constitution says it shall be the duty of the legislature of Idaho to establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public, free, common schools, and I will honor that. The budget in Idaho, 50 to 55% is used for K-12 schools alone, and that's of our general fund. It's about $2 billion. Um, and whether or not that's too much or too little, I think that's sometimes up for argument. But it has been growing and of lately, and a lot of it has been used to catch up from what the last Great Depression led us to. I want to address something about Common Core. Yes, Common Core was a basis for most of our English language and our math standards. The proposal that came before my committee was a review of the rules that came from the administration. And that year, it was either you accept the rules or you don't. And the problem was that if we rejected the current standards, and it wasn't a vote for Common Core, is if you reject the current standards, you have no standards. And that's what was objectionable to me. I did support the concept of replacing the standards, but I wanted it to be in a systematic and orderly way. And that's what we're on now. We have, as a committee, advanced an interim committee to study this. We have also advanced a letter directly to the State Board of Education, the State Department of Education, to get us out of Common Core. We should see the first drafts of getting us out of Common Core this fall, but it will bring us new standards rather than operating without any standards. I don't know of any state that's just outright rejected and left them stranded without standards.
Okay, time. All right, we'll move on. We'll continue on the education swing, Mr. Thompson. So is the money being spent on higher education being spent well? Begin.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And I'll say here that if our K through 12 education house is on fire, then the higher education is burnt to the ground already, morally bankrupt in many cases, and the expense of higher education just continues to escalate. And all of this largely being driven by a pretense of an idea that every person in Idaho needs a higher education. In other words, through the state-funded higher education system, rather than realizing and acknowledging that there are other paths for people to get to a satisfying career and careers that provide life-sustaining income. And not every child needs to be forced or thought to be forced that higher education is the next path for him. We need welders today. We need farmers today. We need moms to raise children today. We need hardworking blue-collar people to work today. And listen, if we continue to think that the only successful path is higher education, and at that, a system that continues to increase its financial needs, it's an inertia that never stops. It's just like property tax. We could sing the same song with property tax. This never ends. The higher education believes they need more facilities, bigger buildings, more state-of-the-art everything, and the next thing you know, all you can do is continue to raise the price of tuition to where it's out of reach for the common child who wants to go and be a doctor, who wants to go and study the sciences and become a teacher and raise the next generation in the education system. But we've really got to get a grip on the higher education. It is as more out of control as the K through 12 system is currently.
Okay. Time. Mr. Clow.
Okay. Thank you. Higher education is a challenge, and when we talk about the state-supplied education versus the private, we have some excellent private colleges and universities in Idaho. And as far as the higher education, I think they're a little out of control in a lot of ways. They want more money, and the legislature has been very restrictive on how much money we continue to send. Their budgets have been sometimes rejected and have to come back and forth to get approval. I want to focus a little bit on the local community college. A lot of the things that are talked about, the welding and the career technical education, a lot of that is actually handled at the community college level. CSI is probably one of the strongest community colleges in the state and provides a lot of those types of experiences. And we all agree, I think, that not everyone needs a college degree, and that many of the education courses or programs that we have are directly set to lead towards a college degree. Um, I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about this because it was alluded to. We shouldn't be relying on higher education, and we talk about private, but even in the public schools, we need to be looking at the choices for our parents to send their children to other options besides the public schools. And that's one thing I've been very strong supporter of. The recent decision in Montana by the US Supreme Court in Montana is going to pave the way to allow a little bit more choice and for our families, especially those in poverty and those that would like a faith-based education, because the Montana unconstitutional amendment was ruled unconstitutional because it was a restraint on freedom of the religion. I see us moving in that direction also in K-12.
Okay. And time. So we'll move on. I think you're kind of heading in that direction. But the next question, Mr. Thompson, should Idahoans be given school vouchers for education? Again.
Yeah, I appreciate that question as well. And the whole position on how do we fund education and how do we encourage parents who want to send their children to an alternative education system that's not part of the public school system, that is paid for by the property taxes and the taxes that are given, that everyone who, whether they send their son or their daughter to the public school, are paying the taxes for that. And so I do believe that there ought to be some kind of a way to relieve the expense upon the household that wants to educate their child in an alternative manner, whether it be private school, and that private school being either religious or just industrial private, or want to homeschool their child and the expenses to do that. Just as we're taking tax money away from the common citizen to pay for what we want to do for a good education for our children, but is there a way that we can reduce the burden on those who are wanting to educate their children in a more in a manner that's more direct and more personal for them? And I would support a position that would allow that would give a pathway for them to use their funds to support their local, either to reduce the price of their private school or to supplement or to that they would pay for themselves. They're not going to supplement their homeschool. They're paying that for themselves. But I can tell you this, that until we get legislature under control in this matter of education, this is like a fire-breathing dragon sitting in the room. And all of the responsibility of this education in the state of Idaho is on the legislature. We got to stop letting the federal government tell us how to educate our children. The fire-breathing dragon needs to be put out, and we need to educate the children. We need to liberate the education.
Anti. Oh, I didn't catch it in time. All right, there we go. Mr. Clow, begin.
Yeah, thank you, Benito. Your question led to vouchers, and I want to point out that vouchers have been popular in some parts of the country to allow students to live in a neighborhood school, and they're expected to go to a certain neighborhood school that may be underperforming. It may be because of poverty areas. There can be a whole variety of reasons why vouchers make a sense. But in Idaho, we have open enrollment. So we have students right now that are living in one school district and then they're going to another and back and forth. We have a lot of Twin Falls students going to Kimberly and some Kimberly kids coming to Twin Falls because of a variety of reasons. The voucher program by itself, that definition is probably not needed in Idaho. However, I was the first education chairman to allow the introduction of an education savings account. And that's where the state would put funds into a special account that could be used for students' education at the parents' direction. It has to be used specifically in approved education areas, but it would allow it to be used in private schools. And if you have a special education student and you would like to be able to keep your student home but get some of these services yourself, you can use the money for some of that. And that is something I expect. This ruling that I mentioned about Montana versus, Espinosa versus Montana is going to open up that choice option. Currently, the state law says you cannot utilize any state tax funds that would go towards any religious school. And with that clearing of that as an unconstitutional provision, which covers Idaho as well, we will be in a position to begin using education savings accounts to help with students. We can't do it overnight to every student because that would be, we wouldn't be able to afford to do that. But you have to remember, when a student leaves the public school system and goes to a private school, the money is reduced in the need for the public school.
Time. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Kind of back to um, city government. So, Mr. Thompson, what is your position on urban renewal agencies used by cities? Again.
Yeah, there's no mistaking here that this is a place that I've got to get some more education on and some better understanding in. I do think, from what I do understand, and I attend our local city council meetings as many Monday nights as possible in person. I want to know what's going on in my own city, and so I know that the urban renewal process is very active in the city of Twin Falls. We've seen some benefits from it. We've seen some revitalization in parts of the city that we wouldn't see perhaps through another manner or through another way. But I think this probably fits inside of more of the local taxing condition that we were speaking of earlier. Excuse me. What always concerns me in any kind of a process or a system that we entangle ourselves in is how much of the federal government is attached to this. And when the federal government is attached to money that comes to local places, there's always strings attached. And we shouldn't expect the government to not have strings attached whenever they have money that they want to send a particular way or a place. But let's be clear about this. When we receive federal money at any level for any thing that's going on in our state, we lose local control of those things. We may call it our local urban renewal districts, and we're seeing local things happening there, but we continue to lose the local control of it, the local influence on it. And so, from my position, from where I would address these things and fight for them inside of the legislature, is let's be sure that we're not tying the hands of the people to the hands of the government or to the chains of the government. So I suppose I have another 6 or 7 seconds.
You got about 11 seconds.
That I have nothing else to say, but I
It's your time.
appreciate the question, and it's a good one to be thinking about for a long time.
Okay, and time. All right, Mr. Clow, begin.
Yeah. The Urban Renewal Agency in Twin Falls and the projects that we've done with economic development have created many, many very high quality jobs in this area that we have sorely needed. Urban renewal is not a federal program. It is truly a local program. There are some federal grants that can be applied to for on special projects, and usually they're minimal compared to the size of the overall projects. An example on federal money, and I hate to get into the weeds on this, but when Chobani came to Idaho, they wanted we needed to extend some sewer lines and water lines. The federal government has restrictions on how you can use that money. Including what labor wages would be paid, for example. The city, a bunch of smart people down there. So what they did is instead of using it for the labor, they went out and they bought the pipe with the money, and they physically bought the pipe, and it wasn't involved with the labor and et cetera. But urban renewal money is paid for by the taxes that are generated by the new business that comes in. It is not taking taxes away from any citizen. If Chobani did not exist, the money that is being used to pay for Chobani wouldn't have existed. So you take their property taxes, a portion of their property taxes, and use that to advance fund projects for companies like Chobani. Urban renewal is a powerful tool, and Twin Falls has been held up as the model of how it should be done around the state. I've been involved with legislation, I've been involved with committees on urban renewal, and what's been done around the state sometimes has been a problem, and we have addressed new language in the urban renewal laws to address some of the problems, and I think we've cleaned up a lot of those problems. But urban renewal is a positive impact on the city of Twin Falls.
And time. Okay, moving on. We'll move back. Actually, our final question this morning, and then we can move on to your rebuttal and closing statements. So we'll look at state government. What's your position on the power of the governor and the legislature? And Mr. Thompson, please go.
Yeah, listen, I think that probably right now every Idahoan is paying closer attention to local state government than ever before, and what kind of authority is granted to the governor, or for that matter, what we've even been experiencing, what gets then moved over to bureaucracies. In other words, local health districts and the authority that they have. And so let me be really clear on this, that if the people of District 24 were to elect me on November the 3rd, that I will be among the many legislators that will be demanding that we change the current code that addresses the authority that's given to one single individual in a time of what's stated as a state of emergency. But I want to be clear on this, where I appreciate and I'm grateful for the government that I live in, to claim a state of emergency when there is no emergency is a great atrocity to the people. It's not to say that the current virus that we're experiencing, and we're seeing the spikes of new numbers showing up in our own region here, it's not to say that I deny that it's not a real virus and it's a real issue. But it's really clear to this common citizen, this tax-paying citizen, it's clear to me, who's not inside of the current legislature, is not a part of the government, it's clear to me that the only reason to declare a state of emergency for this issue is because there's money that's promised that comes alongside of it. And I want to say again to the people of District 24 that when the government comes promising money and there's requirements that you have to do to get that money, then you are being tied to the post and you're being held captive by a tyrannical government. And I'm saying I want the people of Idaho to know that no single person should ever have that kind of control.
And time. Mr. Clow, begin.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I believe the governor acted in the best interest of our citizens. They are exhausted right now. It is past the time for the legislature to either end the emergency or redefine the policies under which we live. Between the federal and the Idaho constitutions, including the laws that we live under, the governor has performed within the law. However, it is time for us to act. I expect that my Republican colleagues will join me to review the emergency provisions of the law to establish well-defined limits on emergency powers. This is the first time these codes have been used that were given to the governor by the legislature. We're going to have to be addressing those. We also need the ability to call ourselves back into session. We discovered that this summer, that there's no way the legislature can call us back into session to readdress all the laws. We had a special session that was called by the governor, and he put the agenda out there. In his agenda, he did not even include education items as part of the emergency. Not even education. 300,000 students and all the teachers and all the parents that are dealing with the state of emergency, that was not considered an issue that the legislature should deal with. For that reason, and many others, I want to make sure everyone knows that I voted to end the state of emergency. You need to hear, I voted to end that state of emergency. Now, as far as the federal monies, we should not declare a state of emergency to get federal dollars. But my understanding is the big pot, the big stimulus money, the 1.25 billion, was not contingent upon us declaring a state of emergency. But I also understand that at the time that the governor declared that, there probably was kind of an emergency feeling going on. But to extend it as much as we have, that is where we have a problem. We need to end the emergency.
And time. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Let me reset the clock and not turn off the microphone. We're going to give you 3 minutes for your closing statements and any rebuttals you may have. And again, we'll go just in the order we started. So that leads to you, Mr. Thompson. I will set the clock and please begin.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I'm grateful to Representative Clow's agreement to have this debate and to the radio station for your kindness here to support this and make a way for this. I would say in some levels of rebuttal to some of the statements and the non-statements that have been made throughout the morning. One, first of all, I would go back to the positions on abortion, where there is indeed inconsistency inside of the legislature. If we believe that life begins at conception, and I believe that I heard Representative Clow say that he believes that, then why do we allow exceptions in the law? Why do we allow exceptions to allow for the murder of some children and in some circumstances, in some situations? That's inconsistent not only with his party's platform, but it's also inconsistent with general morality. And I can tell you this, that the idea that Idaho chooses life is something that you want to be used on your side to prove your pro-life position. Idaho Chooses Life has actively opposed the abolishment of abortion in the state of Idaho. That is no abortion that is no A+ rating from anyone who wants to see abortion abolished in the state of Idaho. Idaho chooses life. David Ripley himself, I've had conversations with him, and his standing in the way of abolishing abortion in the state of Idaho. Every Idahoan ought to know. Not only do we need to defund Planned Parenthood, but we need to defund Idaho Chooses Life. They're not doing anything to advance. All we're doing right now is regulating abortion. Let's definitely understand this. We want to keep claim to our liberty. The state of Idaho is indeed a great place to live. I mean, look around. Everywhere you look, people are wanting to move here. I'm running for Idaho House of District 24 as a Constitution Party candidate of Idaho. Well, some will argue that third-party votes waters down the conservative stronghold. Hey, listen, I say to you today that's a wrong and a misleading direction that many Republicans want to convince you of. It's C.S. Lewis who says, hey, when the whole world is running toward a cliff, he who's running in the opposite direction appears to have lost his mind. Hey, we've heard the historic warnings of our founding fathers of this blessed land. It's Adam White who says in his essay published in The Atlantic on February 4th, 2020, entitled A Republic If You Can Keep It. He says that a government set up by James Madison and other founders requires a virtuous people and virtuous leaders, or the whole system fails.
And time. All right, clear the clock. 3 minutes. Mr. Clow.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having us here today and the opportunity to share these thoughts. And I have my closing remarks, but I have to start out with shame on you for saying that about Idaho Chooses Life. They've been the leading cause for pro-life issues in this state, and David Ripley has been that head. I do not have a close relationship with David Ripley, but every time these issues come up, everybody in the legislature, the most pro-life people in that legislature, say you need to talk with David Ripley. You need to
and
talk
yet
with
we
that.
continue.
No. It's his time. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mr. Clow.
I know this is a passion for you, but that is unfair. And you say to defund it with what? They're private funds. You know, you want to defund your church? You know, that's private funds too. So that is troublesome to me that you would attack somebody like that that's not here to defend themselves. But anyway, I want to say that my strengths are listening, and I think I just showed that. I was listening to what was said, and it's thrown me off my direction that I wanted to go here. I'm confident that I'm prepared to continue to represent District 24, and I have the experience, the values, and the work ethic to do so. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but my record speaks for itself. The fact that I was endorsed by the leading pro-life organization in this state should not be a detriment to my campaign. They did give me their endorsement. The fact that the National Rifle Association has endorsed me and given me an A rating should not be a detriment to my campaign. I routinely seek advice from my pastor, who reminds me that we have a loving and forgiving God and that I should trust my instincts and values the church has taught me. You can trust me to protect your rights, rely on my personal values, and look to the U.S. and the Idaho constitutions as guides in all my decisions. And with that, I want to go back and mention the legislation that was recently talked about is alluded to that no abortions, no exceptions. And that was what set off a discussion with my opponent and myself in my office this last year on some legislation he was proposing. I said, no exceptions. Does that include the termination of an ectopic pregnancy and he said, yes, it does. Now he's telling me otherwise, but I want to say to you right now that the law itself said that if a woman had a tubal pregnancy, that law would have required the sacrifice or the health of that woman to be sacrificed in order to save both the mother and the child. However, if there is no viable chance to save the child, a woman should be able, and their doctor, make the health decision to save that woman. And that by itself is reason enough to say that law was flawed.
Okay, 3 and time. Gentlemen, thank you. I do appreciate it. So we do have some time left, and Bill and I have discussed of a kind of unique way to end this with the time we have left. It's not very much time. We've got about maybe 3-4 minutes left. we are going to open the mic to both of you to have a civil discussion. You guys can ask each other questions on whatever topic, but we ask that you be civil. So we will
Sure.
give you that time now. The mic is open and yours. I will not interrupt it whatsoever.
Yeah, I would like to just first of all acknowledge that I do not hold that tubal pregnancies is in any way related to what's happening at Planned Parenthood in Twin Falls, Idaho. You don't go to Planned Parenthood to deal with a triage situation. You go to the hospital, and doctors know how
See,
to
I'm
treat
going to
that
interrupt here.
situation.
Okay, that's what you said. That is true, what he just said. However, the bill that he was proposing that I sponsor,
And this is not true what he's about to say.
it is true, because you asked me to sponsor that bill, and I told you I couldn't go so far as to risk the life of a woman in a tubal pregnancy, and you said that there are no exceptions. It's written in the bill.
The Abolish Abortion Act of Idaho clearly stipulates, and this would be in our conversation that we had in your office there at the State House, the exceptions that Representative Clow wants to ensure that we continue to have are the exceptions for children that are conceived in rape or incest. That's inconceivable if life begins at conception to make exceptions for children that were conceived, yes, in situations that were difficult and complex, but nonetheless real bona fide life.
So let's talk about rape and incest for a moment. The reason that I have felt that that might be necessary in any law is because I'm not sure we could ever get a bill passed that didn't include that. I don't necessarily, what I have said is that we should go back to the pre-Roe v. Wade laws, which did include the life of the woman. That prior to Roe v. Wade, and that's what triggered all of these discussions, the life of the woman, the health of the woman was protected in Idaho law. Rape and incest were blank. But I do believe from hearing people that that is an important issue, that those victims and their parents and or the victims themselves should have a choice. Under today's law, they do have that choice. But what I'm saying here is what I want to do is go back to what the laws were prior to Roe v. Wade, and that would protect the life of a woman. And the bill very specifically says, in the leading comment says, no abortions, no exceptions. And then when you read the law, it talks about any termination of a pregnancy inside or outside of a woman.
So this is just clearly a misunderstanding of the science, because ectopic pregnancies are not considered abortions. They may technically be used at the hospital with the term because it's a natural abortion. The child has died in the wrong place. And so an abortion, an extraction of the child has to take place, but you're not ending the life to remove the child. I don't know if we have enough time to address the rainy day funds, but I'd like to know if Representative Clow knows where Idaho rainy day funds are invested.
I'll let you answer, Mr. Clow.
Well, they're not invested well.
They're not invested in Idaho.
Well, the treasurer, Julie Ellsworth, makes those investment choices, and it's set up by code, and they're a very low rate investment.
Yeah, they're invested in Tennessee, by the way.
The stabilization fund. But they're earning nominal amounts. And last year we attempted to try and increase the rates and change some of those policies. And we weren't successful. We wanted to do that and use that extra revenues to help with the roads. And that didn't
shame
get
on
through.
the legislature that would leave our money in
Okay.
out of state.
I will take the mic
banks.
back. I hate to cut anybody off. We have 30 seconds left. I do want to thank you both for coming in and doing this today.